The Chicago Cubs have a lot of pitchers in their top 30. Are any of them future top of the rotation guys? I hopped on with Matt and Sam from LockedOn Cubs to talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, editor-in-chief of BravesToday.com, freelance baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen. Every single day, we're probably part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today, we are talking Chicago Cubs. I hopped on with Sam and Matt from Locked On Cubs to discuss the pitching prospects in this system. You know, Cade Horton, Jordan Wicks, Kohl Franklin, Killian. Talk about all these fantastic outfielders they have, like a Pete Crow Armstrong or a Brennan Davis, and what they're going to do with the positional logjam they have. And then a little bit of talk about the prospect of the pod, Matt Mervis. Enjoy.
All things Cubs. An off day for the Northsiders on Monday, which means we can get some elbow room, get some more open waters here. And we're pleased to be joined by, for a third time in our show's iteration, Lindsay Crosby of Locked On MLB Prospects. Thank you so much for joining us.
You guys are one of my favorites to do a show with, so whenever you guys have free time, I'd love to come on. And I got to watch some of your prospects in person just about 2 weeks ago. Had a great time, so definitely excited to talk about it.
Lindsay, glad to have you on. Cubbies are 12-9 at the big league level, but before the season, we talked about with you kind of, you know, it's a juggling act of, obviously you want big league success, but you also still have to be very locked in on what's going on the farm. And the first area I want to focus on, because I believe the reason the Cubs struggled for so long was the pitching and the pitching development. And we've talked about it, and you've talked about it beautifully on this show. So, you know, very broadly, I ask you, catch us up on where you're at with some of our big names. Cade Horton's taken them out a couple of times. What have you seen from him? Touch on maybe even Kohl Franklin a bit, work your way up the system and highlight what you want to highlight and educate us and our listeners in terms of, you know, where you're at with some of these guys, because I'm excited about some of them.
Yeah, and that starts with Cade Horton, obviously. I mean, the number 7 overall pick last year, and just the recovery he had from Tommy John was fantastic. Starting off playing third base for Oklahoma to taking the ball in the College World Series and looking fantastic. And so far this year, very good start, right? Two starts in low A. It's only 6 1/3 innings. That's kind of common. You'll see in the minors early in the year, those shorter outings. But no runs allowed, 12 strikeouts in those 6 innings to 3 walks. And the thing that I want to caution people about trying to rush Cade Horton, because I know that there's going to be people who say, well, he did really good at the College World Series. He's looked really good. He needs to move up. The thing you're working on with Cade Horton is he had no 2021 pitching pretty much at all. He had a partial year in 2022. You didn't have him throw after the draft. He was done after the College World Series in essence. And so this year very much needs to be about, we need to see, can he hold his velocity deep into a start? Can he maintain the quality of the stuff through a season? Because he's got a very, very good fastball. It's one of these cut ride fastballs that the system loves so much. The slider is a plus slider, good vertical break to it. Feels like he's the kind of guy you would say, let's give you a sweeper so you have some sort of horizontal weapon, one of those sweepy sliders that we give everybody that they do well with. But so far, the fastball slider look really good. I mean, he's got the curveball. He technically hasn't changed, but I do think he's a candidate to get a sweeper to just give him a nice, well-rounded package. I would look for him. He's not going to be in low A all year. I'd look for him to do some sort of low A to high A. If it's me, I want to get a cup of coffee for him in double A by the end of the year, but I'm trying to be mindful of how many innings he throws. You may see some scenarios where if he's supposed to pitch twice in a week, because they do the 6-game weeks in the minors, you may see him get bumped just so he only has to start once in that week because you're trying to manage the innings. Kohl Franklin, the thing here is same thing. He's working on depth. He missed 2020 because of the COVID. He missed 2021 because of the oblique, and then last year didn't have the results you wanted. What, like 6.8 ERA?
Right.
One of the issues that we saw was commanding the fastball. Right, just very, very poor command of that fastball last year.
That'll hurt. That'll be a problem.
That is definitely a problem. He's in high A. In the 3 starts, he's walked 6 guys in 11 innings. It's not as bad as it was last year, but you're still in a scenario where you've got to work on the fastball command and then being a little more efficient. And then I do think he doesn't necessarily do a great job yet of fixing his sequencing. And this is a guy who he, in essence, lost 2 full years and then got a partial year last year. So he's a little bit rusty. He needs to get better at mixing the fastball, the curveball, and the change more so than just leaning on this is a very, very good fastball that is very hard to hit. So a little bit of, I'm not going to say growing up, but a little bit of going from a thrower to a pitcher needed for Kohl Franklin.
Sure.
Jordan Wicks. I love Jordan Wicks.
Really?
I love him so much.
I love that you love him.
I love him so much. His stats so far this year, 3 starts in AA, very similar to what he did last year. Like, I think he finished last year with like a 3.8 ERA. He's right around there now. I want to say it's like 3.95, 3.97, something like that. Plenty of strikeouts, 17 strikeouts. I'm a little worried about the 3 home runs. He's already given up 3 home runs this year. He gave up 10 all of last year.
Wow.
So part of that is the jump in competition level, right? You go to AA, that's the biggest jump in the minors. But the stuff that he does, he's got the 4-seamer and the 2-seamer. They're not fantastic, but he's added a tick of velocity to them so they can now get 96, 97. As a lefty, it's really good velocity. Again, has a sweeper like so many of these guys do. The changeup has some vertical drop. He's added a cutter. So a lot of different weapons. He's one of those guys, and it's going to sound bad because of his performance right now. He feels like a Hayden Wesneski if you give him better stuff, right? If you give him better velocity, better stuff. He has a bunch of pitches. None of them are like the best pitch of that type in the system.
Sure.
But the package together is really good. I do want him to get better at first pitch strikes. He gets behind batters a lot. And so because of that, his pitch count runs up in the outings, doesn't go as deep as you need him to. But I do like the combination of the 2 fastballs, the slider, the cutter, the changeup. It's as close to kind of a power profile as you might get as far as the fastballs and stuff are concerned for a lefty. So that's good.
Let's put you on the spot because that's what we do on this program. Can you give me a high upside Jordan Wicks comp for our listeners? If everything were to go well, because you watch more pitching than Matt and I combined times 10, give us a high upside comp. I mean, you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to say Sandy Koufax, but is there somebody you see, some lefty out there?
The hard part for me is because I fight against comps so much on my show because it gives people the wrong ideas.
I remember you saying that,
yeah. And so
then, okay.
I'm trying to think about who would be a good fit for similar stuff, can do similar things. He doesn't have the same tools, but the way he approaches pitching reminds me of a Max Fried. Max Fried's big thing is the curveball, where Wicks has it's all setting up that changeup, but it's the same kind of mindset of when he first gets to the bigs, none of these pitches are going to be absolutely amazing, but he's going to use them really well. He's going to stay ahead in the count. He's going to induce weak contact. He's going to get guys to look foolish on a vertical breaking pitch, in this case, the changeup. So different pitch mix, but it reminds me of a young Max Fried. Some of that's just because I'm a Braves fan. But
great answer.
Reminds me of young Max Fried.
That was really good.
Yeah. Caleb Killian is the other one, part of the Chris Bryant trade.
Ride that roller coaster.
That's it. It's a roller coaster. The stats don't look great right now in AAA. 7.15 ERA right now, over 106. Was it 106? 11 innings or so. Had a 4.2 ERA in 106 innings last year. Mm-hmm. The thing here, he's given a bunch of home runs as well. And the issue is he's struggling to find the zone with the secondaries. It's a good curveball, sits in the high 70s. the cutter in the upper 80s. He can't always find the zone with them. And so when he gets behind in the count, he has to throw a strike. So he's throwing a fastball over the plate and it gets rocked.
When he was up last year, he wasn't even throwing his curveball at the big league level. He had no feel for it.
Exactly. And it was weird that he was the one that came up in that scenario.
In hindsight, yeah.
Yeah, it really feels like, and I haven't seen enough slow motion video and fine detailed video to know, but it really feels like it's kind of a mechanical issue more so than anything. When you watch him pitch, his upper half and lower half aren't really together. They're not really synced together. And so it feels like that's kind of where some of this comes from. Because if, like, for instance, if your front foot is landing before you get to your release point, then that's going to kind of naturally impact the flight of the ball because you're going to be pulling the ball down. Or if your mechanics are taking you side to side a bit, that's going to leave you wide of the zone. And so feels like there's some biomechanical work to do there. The fact that he's back in AAA, I was hoping they'd figure out some of that in spring training, and we haven't seen it yet. So I'm kind of hoping this is the year he can fix it. Not as high on him as a lot of the other prospect apparatus is. I've kind of taken Jordan Wicks as the one that I really like outside of the obvious Cade Horton versus Killian, like a lot of people had going into last year.
So either rotation or bullpen, Lindsay, and probably more likely bullpen.
For Killian now,
yeah,
probably as of now, you're looking at, like, the pitch mix is a starter's mix: fastball, curveball, cutter. There's a change in there somewhere. But if you can't throw enough strikes, that means you're isolated to, like, fastball, cutter, change, or something like that, and you're definitely a bullpen piece. Not trusting the curveball, that's the issue, because it's so hard for guys to survive on just fastball, cutter, unless you happen to have one of the best cutters in baseball, and he doesn't. Sure. It's fine. I mean, it's an average cutter. It's not anything special. He can run it up in the zone, get folks to chase it, but it's not an amazing pitch. And so he's got to rediscover the curveball and landing it for strikes if he wants to be a starter.
Is there someone on the pitching prospects list who you think could make an impact on the mound at the big league level this year?
Oh, this year.
Even maybe if they sneak him in out of the pen or something.
Right. I think that there is a scenario where you can take a guy like a Javier Assad. You could use him. I do think Caleb Killian has some value.
Okay. Simply
because of what he can do velocity wise. Again, it's all back to figuring out that curveball. I do think there is a path to do with Jordan Wicks, like some teams do, where towards the end of the year, think about Hunter Brown last year for the Astros.
Sure.
He comes up, he gets a start or two, he works out of the bullpen the rest of the year, and then he contends for a job in spring training this year.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I do think there's something like that for Jordan Wicks. It's just going to come down to a little bit of an approach adjustment. So he's throwing first pitch strikes. Ryan Jensen's another guy that you may be able to see come up and actually make an impact. Not as sold on that, but I do think it's possible for him to do it as well.
Lastly, in terms of pitching, just overall, like, do you feel like where do the Cubs pitching system compare as we stand here or sit here in 2023 versus, let's say, 5 years ago? Do you feel good about it? If you were a Cub fan, the jump that they made, as somebody that evaluates all these guys all the time, can you see a palpable difference where it's like, hey, okay, the Cubs are doing something here, they fixed something, or is it negligible?
I feel like there's a strategy now to it. Like there's an idea. This is what we want to do. This is what we believe in. We believe in, you've heard it a couple times from me already. We believe in the sweepy horizontal breaking slider. We believe in the cut ride fastball. Like there's a coherent theme here.
Yeah.
And they're doing a better job at finding guys who fit that strategy and have the raw tools that you can go and tweak what they do, whether it's trade acquisitions or it's draftees like Cade Horton. I mean, Cade Horton's kind of the perfect candidate to give that sweepy slider to, because he's got a fastball with natural cut and ride on it. And then everything else he has is more of a vertical breaking pitch. And so kind of based on how he pronates and things like that, he's a guy who could take it. And so I do feel better about the system now. The one question that I have is top end. I struggle to think about, are there any of these guys that you could realistically see as an opening day starter and you're like, yeah, that's one of the better ones in baseball?
If anybody, it's Horton, right?
If anybody, it's Horton. And he's probably, I mean, being realistic, he's probably 2 years away.
Yeah.
And it's something where the top end isn't there as much. And the guys that are top end, like a Cade Horton, are very new to the system, are very kind of raw as far as recent pitching experience. And so it's easier to say, yes, we think they could improve.
Right.
But you also have less of a track record to say, yeah, we know he's going to do it. I mean, he pitched that final year in Oklahoma. He pitched 12 times, something like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's a project. He's a project.
Yeah, he's a project. And so it's like, yeah, he could be a number one, number two, but he's a project. And it's not like there's 3 or 4 all stud pitching prospects sitting right there that could all contend to be a number one. That's kind of my, not gripe with the system, but that's kind of the outside look of it.
If only there was this free agent next year that was a top end pitcher and then threw in 40 homers a year. That'd be pretty crazy, wouldn't it?
That would be wild. I don't know. I mean, and a guy that seems to get really good at adding pitches and developing throughout the year, as well as has done a really good job at working with young players, specifically catchers, kind of reaching out and embracing them and saying, hey, I want to work with you and I want you to get better. I'm thinking about Logan O'Hoppe, but I'm also thinking about Miguel Amaya. So
Matt, I know
that.
I know we need to go to break here. Could, Lindsay, give me like 45 seconds on what you've seen with Wesneski, because I'm a little bit concerned, and by a little bit I mean not a little bit. It's a lot of blue on StatCast. It's a lot. Explain what that means to our listeners.
Okay, so on StatCast, this is where you use all of the advanced motion capture and the cameras and everything to go in and look at all of the particulars about the pitches you are throwing. Not only the speed you're throwing them, how much they spin. I mean, how much guys swing and miss or they chase it, and then it quantifies it on a 1 through 100 scale for all of these things. The better you are, the more red that particular option is. For, say, extension. Hayden Wesneski's 72nd percentile on extension, which is how close to the plate do you release the ball?
Right.
The closer to the plate you are, the faster the pitch feels like it's coming to a hitter.
Who's like in the top end of that, like Bautista on the Orioles or someone like that?
He's pretty high up there. Diaz with the Reds is pretty high up there. Yeah, okay. A lot of guys who have the lower slots end up being pretty good on extension because they're coming up like that.
Sure.
But just about everything else is blue. Expected batting average against, average exit velocity. He's 22nd percentile in chase rate. He's 12th percentile in whiff percentage at swing and miss.
Awful.
It's just the stuff isn't as good as we saw in the sample last year.
Right.
And his whole thing is he has to work. Like, the stuff isn't amazing. He's got a good slider, the fastball, the cutter, the change, but he's got to mix things in. He's got to get you to chase. He's got to kind of get you to fool, and he's working off a deception.
I thought the stuff was better than this.
I don't know if this is a slow start to the year, if this is a competition thing, or if this is something step back in the stuff. I want to think this is just a slow start to the year. Started 4 times, 17 innings.
Right.
Feels like you need a little bit more before you can accurately kind of quantify the quality of the stuff.
Sure.
Straight ahead, we get into position players with Lindsay. Stay tuned. Getting to know yourself better can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp, one of today's sponsors, connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery wherever you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB. Welcome back to Locked On Cubs. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. So a little producing on the fly here. We're going to discuss positional prospects with Lindsay, and then we're going to finish with the certain first base prospect in which Lindsay created a campaign for.
And speaking of producing, I just want to say that Lindsay broke to me that he was going to be on the show today, as we discussed on Monday's program.
That's right. So, Lindsay, a lot of fans right now are really curious about this. Seiya Suzuki is signed through 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Ian Happ is now signed through 2026. And even myself, I'm curious. Okay, here's a loaded outfield group: PCA, Alcantara, Davis, Canario, Casey. How do you regard this group, first of all? And what would you say to somebody in terms of what happens to these players? Because I think it just all happens organically.
Yeah, talking to some people within the organization, talking to some people close to some of these players, the belief is that somebody at the major league level is going to get moved. And the thought is probably Ian Happ would eventually get moved. And I know it surprises a lot of people to hear that because they think he just signed an extension. But one of the main reasons you extend players is because you now have cost certainty as to this is what I am paying for this level of production. And so I like this group. We've talked about PCA a ton. I know you guys have. I have. I've seen him in person. He is everything we thought he was. He is your center fielder of the future. After him, you've got a lot of guys that profile better as corner outfield types. And like you said, you have a Suzuki, you have an Ian Happ, you've got some stuff to figure out. Canario's hurt right now, so we can't get a lot on that. Brennan Davis, to me, a lot of people are still really high on his upside. He needs to stay healthy.
Right.
And from the time that I've seen him this year, he's still struggling with the pitch recognition and the swing decisions. And a lot of that is the spin. Now, the stats look pretty bad. And some of that is he's been victimized by very bad batting average on balls in play. But he is still struggling kind of fundamentally with spin, recognizing that, not swinging at that. You can improve that as you get older. He is just now 23.
Right.
But it feels like, as far as these guys working out at the major league level, you have PCA, who is at this point more likely than not to make it. And then you kind of have everybody else. And everybody has some issues in their game. They have some gaps. Davis is obviously his hit tool. I think it might actually end up being a little bit below average right now.
Okay.
As far as he's got to recognize spin better. You look at Alcantara, even better power, massive frame. Again, can play center, better suited to be a corner guy. And still a thing with the hit tool. He also struggles to recognize spin a little bit. And then you take a guy like a Casey, and I watched him hit 3 home runs a week and a half ago in the same game. And that first home run, that grand slam he hit, was literally the loudest ball I have ever heard in person in my entire life. Jeez. I jumped when I heard it, thinking that it was a gunshot and not a home run. So it's great. And that's that was an improvement on what we've seen. Like, it was something where his swing has always kind of been really long. He had the pitch recognition, he had the awareness, but the mechanics weren't quite there. And when he was able to put it all together, I like his ceiling now as far as the offense goes, to be a guy that at worst is a DH, but at best can play a corner outfield. He has the arm to play right or left. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's Armstrong, Casey, and then everybody else below him. As far as that's kind of the order, just based on what I've seen a little bit early this year, plus how, the weaknesses that they have and how fixable is it. It's a lot easier for Casey to shorten a swing than it is for Davis and Alcantara to start recognizing spin and not swinging at it.
So, because the first time you were on this show, you were a big Alcantara guy. So
I still like him.
Yeah.
I still like him. I still think the tool's really good, and the ceiling is one of the highest tools. It's almost to the point where like I'm getting a little frustrated that he hasn't made the improvements yet.
Yeah.
Because he's got just about everything else. He's got the speed,
Sure.
he's got obviously the raw power. It's just we need him to make to get better at picking up spin. And it's a fixable thing. It is, but at this point, I've got Casey above him simply because Casey feels like his ceiling might not be as high, but his floor isn't as low. If that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
From your side of the glass, Lindsay, let's say PCA was up the next 3 games with the Cubs. How do you think he would do?
I think he'd be fine. I think it's a scenario where his power probably isn't going to play at the major league level yet. He's going to be similar to Adley Rutschman last year, where it was the extra base hits were more so of doubles than home runs. It'd be something similar to that, but I like his pitch recognition. I like his swing decisions. And then the floor is so high because of the defense.
Right.
Where I think if something happened to Bellinger and he was up tomorrow,
There's no drop off defensively.
There's no drop off defensively, which is very hard to say that for a lot of guys. But again, I think PCA is the best outfield defender in the minors.
Yeah.
Full stop.
That's awesome.
Matt, do you want to do a certain first baseman now, or how do you want to do it?
We're going to do that coming up next. Today's episode is also brought to you by So Rare. So Rare is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace, transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards, and there's no cost to play. Head to sorare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today. sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today with So Rare. Welcome back to LockedOn Cubs. Thanks for making us your first listen. And we saved the best for last because there is a player right now, undoubtedly, could help the Cubs at the major league level. We talked about it on Monday's episode, Sam and I, Lindsay. The Cubs, for some reason, positionally have 2 clear players, Edwin Rios and Luis Torrens, really don't have a role.
None.
And so perhaps there even is a path for Hosmer, Mancini, and Matt Mervis really on the roster right now. There's the hashtag.
Free
the
Matt
man.
Mervis.
Do we have to drive the Des Moines?
Matthew Jared Mervis should be in Chicago on this roster. Okay, here's the thing for me. In AAA Iowa, in 18 games, here's the slash line. 288, 410, 576.
That'll play.
Yeah. 14 walks to 16 strikeouts. So 20.5% strikeout rate, 20.5, which is higher than Eric Hosmer's strikeout rate, but lower than Trey Mancini's.
Okay.
17.9% walk rate.
That might be higher than Mancini and Hosmer combined.
That, in fact, is higher than Mancini because I looked at both of them.
Yeah,
Eric Hosmer's at an 18.6% strikeout rate and an 8.5% walk rate. Trey Mancini's having a rough start to the year. 29.3% strikeout rate, 1/3 of the time, and he's walking 2.7% of the time.
Let's end the show.
The biggest change here, the biggest difference, though, is on the isolated slugging. Like he's hitting so much better than either Hosmer or Mancini. And to me, Mancini has additional positional value as far as covering outfield innings. He's on a 2-year deal. I understand the business.
Be careful with that.
Eric Hosmer, there is no reason that Eric Hosmer should be on this roster ahead of Matt Mervis. There is zero reason.
Wow.
And if I have to go to Iowa myself and get him and put him in a car and take him to Chicago, I will do it.
How about Luis Torrens, Lindsay? He doesn't ever play. He could be on the roster. You don't even have to cut Hosmer or Mervis. You could just DH Hosmer. Excuse me. You could just DH Mervis versus righties. Let Hosmer get his first base reps in, and then lefties. Mancini plays first, and then you could mix in. You could ease Mervis in and not play him versus lefties. It makes no sense.
Carrying a third catcher, and I know Torrens has use at first base and things like that.
Except they haven't done it. Exactly.
Yeah. Carrying a third catcher doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I know that Yan Gomes
teams are doing it.
Like Yan Gomes isn't tearing up the world. Tucker Barnhart's not an absolute stud, no doubt, like all-star. That's fine. You don't need a third guy, especially if you're not playing him. And
right.
If you're going to bring up Mervis, he does need to play. Like, don't get me wrong. He needs to be in the he needs to be on the field getting at bats a couple times a week at least.
More than that,
he's got nothing to learn in AAA Iowa. He's not being challenged, and he's not struggling in AAA Iowa.
Right. No. And if anything, his probably development's getting hurt because he's not seeing anything around the plate anymore.
That was a big thing that I had that stat somewhere, but
that's all right.
It was something where he's getting like less than 50% strikes.
Right.
Like they're just not pitching to him.
Just talking off my cuff.
And so at a certain point, it's like he's nothing. It doesn't help you to have him down there.
I would go as far as to say Matt Mervis has more power than Eric Hosmer if Mervis swung a wiffle ball bat. I'm serious.
All right. Well, maybe he has one nearby.
Yeah.
Or BP.
The isolated slugging for Eric Hosmer. The isolated slugging is like 111 is the ISO for Hosmer, where Mervis is like 295. So
we watch it.
Yeah.
What was that striking walk rate? That was the Mancini walk rate.
Mancini's walk rate's like 2.9%.
2.7% walk rate.
And his career is like 9%, I think.
Yeah. 29.3% strikeout rate this season now.
Well,
that's almost devastating.
Versus Mervis walking at rounding to 18% and striking out at 20.5%.
We might as well have Matt Cozy just loosen up his back and see if he can go out and take some pitches. I mean, don't bring up a bat and walk.
Could you walk one in every 33 at-bats, Matt? Because if you could draw one walk in 33 at-bats, congratulations, you have equal Trey Mancini's walks.
I was known for my eye when I played, so I think I may possibly,
Feels like it.
Yes, no approach. Lindsay, this was a lot of fun, just as you predicted, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for doing live shows where I can hop on and just tell people to embrace the movement of free Matt Mervis. Hashtag free Matt Mervis. He is the prospect of the pod for LockedOn MLB Prospects.
Oh, he is?
Right.
Yes, he is officially the prospect of the pod because he is the guy that we are trying to get promoted. That's how this works. We choose a prospect of the pod. We campaign for them to get promoted, and then usually they do.
Fantastic.
So he is the prospect of the pod for LockedOn MLB Prospects, which you can find wherever you get your podcast, on YouTube or on Twitter at LockedOn Farm, or you can follow me at Crosby Baseball.
I'm not sure that there's anybody in the industry that knows more about what they're supposed to know about than you.
I agree with that.
No, I'm serious. And it doesn't sound like a compliment, but it is. We're supposed to know about the Cubs, and we know a lot about the Cubs, but you and prospects is something that's really kind of spectacular.
There's 120 domestic teams above rookie ball, and I do my best. There's some I don't have a lot on, but I love coming on this show. I love following the Cubs team, the Cubs system, and so
you like that kid that debuted against the Cubs for Oakland,
Mason Miller.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I knew he was good. I did not know he was that good.
Yeah, right.
I would have picked him up in Dynasty had I known he was that good.
Yeah,
so, I'll be honest, that surprised even some of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Got it. Lindsay mentioned he was with us at a live show. Every day or stay with us all week long. And Tuesday night, we will be live after Cubs Padres. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for LockedOn Cubs on YouTube and smash the like button on all your favorite LockedOn Cubs content. For the algorithm, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods on the audio side, and streaming soon on SiriusXM. For Lindsay Crosby, Sam Olber, I'm Matt Cozy. This has been a crossover edition of LockedOn Cubs and LockedOn MLB Prospects.